This edition of MacVoices is supported by you, our viewers and listeners, through our new Patreon campaign. If you get value from MacVoices, please consider helping support the show by visiting patreon.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we're going to talk a little bit about a conference that I didn't get to that's already passed, but I think is kind of interesting. There's so many great conferences in the community right now, it seems, that trying to get to all of them would be almost a full-time job. So we try to pick out some people that either are going or have been and get a flavor of what happened there. The conference I'm talking about is the JNUC conference. And what does that stand for? JAMF Nation Users Conference, JNUC. And here to tell us about it is Mr. David Ginsburg. David, welcome. It's good to have you back.
Oh, thanks, Chuck. Glad to be here. And it was a great event. I can't wait to tell you about it.
Yeah, it sounded like it. Of course, several of our friends were there, and a lot of people that we don't know, but that just means they're friends you haven't met yet. But first, let's hit with the basics. What is the JAMF Nation User Conference?
Well, what it is it's if anybody's not familiar with JAMF Nation is just an amazing place that you can find out anything and everything relates to Apple, and especially in the enterprise, because JAMF, as we all know, is you have JAMF Now and you have JAMF Pro. And the Pro version is really suited for educational and for enterprise. Of course, I work in the enterprise, and we're looking and exploring to roll this out potentially at some point. So it's basically all these crazy enterprise people, and it's a mix. And that's why I found it interesting, because you had all these educational folks. I mean, in fact, I had a relative, or my wife's relative was there too, and she works in a school district that they deploy over 16,000 iPads to high school students. So, I mean, so that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with those kind of folks. And then you have big companies who are deploying Macs and want to have a better control in a controlled setting, because that's what enterprise does, is they do a lot of control relates to how the Macs are deployed. So this was a conference that had everybody. It's 1,500 strong. I couldn't believe it. It was just a huge event. I mean, it was at the Hyatt Regency in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And they had 5 full floors of this hotel. If you walk and look at this hotel, it was amazing how many different ballrooms and conference rooms that they had for all the different sessions that were out there. So really, that's really what the focus is. Everything that relates to JAMF, and Microsoft's involved, Apple's involved. I mean, there's all kinds of different vendors. Cisco's another one. So I'll tell you even some of the more things that I was highlighted what I saw this past week.
Yeah, now just under the header of heading a full disclosure, JAMF is or has been a sponsor of MacVoices, and that's all there needs to be said about that, because they make a great product. I've played with it a little bit. In my environment, I don't necessarily need it, but after you play with it a little, you realize just how useful it can be, because you have devices, iDevices, you have Macs deployed all over the country, all over the world at times, and trying to manage those devices, keep them secure, address issues with lost devices or stolen devices. I mean, that can be just a nightmare.
Well, also, I didn't even mention the other piece that's really hot is Apple TV. They're deploying Apple TVs out to the enterprise and to like hotels. They're putting Apple TVs actually in hotels, and JAMF can actually manage them. So they could actually, there was a demonstration that actually it was 2 Japanese fellows that came over and did a presentation talking about how they deployed to over 100 rooms at a hotel in Japan. And all the content's controlled. Anything that's controlled is controlled through JAMF. And same thing with conference rooms for different enterprise applications. So I think I got kind of interested looking at Apple TV in that sense, because I think it's an exciting thing that they're looking at. So it relates to the enterprise. So it's pretty exciting.
That's interesting. That's something we haven't really talked about much at all, is Apple TV in the enterprise. I mean, and it makes perfect sense for the entertainment industry, the hospitality industry. I know we have one in our conference room at the office, which it feels like it's constantly in use. So yeah, that's really interesting. I've got to wrap my head around that one.
Yeah, and I did the same, because I attended a couple of the sessions just to find out a little bit more of what they do, but it works exactly the same as far as enrollment and control, just like it does with Macs and iOS devices. I mean, it can be enrolled in the device enrollment program that Apple has. You have full control of how the devices can be imaged, and they can be erased at a whim. I mean, it's it was very interesting. It's more in my application, working in enterprises as you and I do. I could see it as a great application for conference rooms. People can now walk up, and if they have their Macs, they go into the room and they can go AirPlay and be able to display their laptop or even their iOS device without having all those big rings of dongles that are sitting on the table every time, because you have to plug all those things every time you did a presentation on a TV. We have in our offices is the big ring of dongles that you have to have to plug everything in. So I think that's really what I was very interested in seeing how that continues on, and it looks like an exciting market for Apple TV.
Yeah, I haven't thought about an Apple TV in the enterprise, so I'm sure there are uses that you and I haven't even. Well, I haven't thought about. Maybe you had some other uses that they talked about.
Well, in the case of the hotel, when they did the demonstration, they asked about how would you show Netflix, and they said, well, do you have a standard account that someone can sign into? And they said, no, we had just like a standard account, I guess, a single account that people could sign into. But I had thought most of the folks that did that would go through and be lost my train of thought there. That the Apple TV would be signed in with a different account. Or like if the visitor would go in and actually sign into their account. So it was very interesting to see how they're going to apply that. But right now there was no real set way of doing it. But that's one of the applications. And then having all the local, not necessarily local, but even the networks. But again, in Japan, it's a little different, obviously, because it's a little different than what we do here in the United States. I thought that was interesting to see how they would apply it.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to check into a hotel that had an Apple TV and just send something from my phone. I mean, I don't even necessarily need the capability of logging in to their Apple TV with Netflix on the Apple TV. Just let me log in on my device and AirPlay it up.
Right. So I think it's going to be an exciting piece, and I think I see schools are starting to use it now too in the education market. So I think you're going to see some different applications across the board with it. So and JAMF supports them just like an iOS device. tvOS has full support now with its latest version. Being able to control, the other thing also I remember that they talked about was apps. I mean, enterprise could actually design apps in-house and have specific apps that they may use for a specific application relating to their enterprise needs. So you have that ecosystem as well. And now that they have apps, that app developers that are developing them for tvOS, there's that possibility too. So.
Yeah, we know that there are apps that are developed for iOS that are side-loaded or loaded into the app store with certain security guidelines. That would make perfect sense. A white label Apple TV app. Exactly.
And something specific to whatever needs the enterprise needs. I mean, same thing in education. They might have a specific app that they use to access specific systems. Maybe Apple TV could be a good application for that. And instead of having to have an iPad and AirPlay it over, it's right there on the Apple TV.
Yeah. David, it seems like every show I've done recently, we have to have a discussion of some kind about security, about what the focus is on security. And of course, if you're talking about the enterprise, that's got to be a huge focus with the Equifax hack out there right now, sure, and all the fallout from that. What kind of things did they hit with security?
Well, I could tell you the one that stood out to me the most was they had somebody from the military in the Navy that came out, and they talked about some of the different things that they do. And I mean, they're using smart cards, they're using 3- and 2-factor authentication. Security is a big high piece, and that's pretty standard for any enterprise too, because you have to decide: do you want on-premise? Because they have two choices, and when you install Jamf, you have either the on-premise version, which will be installed onto a server, which is local, so it's not outside of the network, it's internal, or you do the cloud. And this day and age, a lot of enterprises, and I talked to a few different enterprise folks, and Allstate was one of them, and a couple others. I asked them, what'd you guys go with? Oh yeah, we're on-prem right now, but we want to look at cloud. But cloud is just such a no-no in the enterprise right now with security. It's just they're very concerned about it. So I mean, and rightfully so, because it is outside of the bounds of the network. But the way the cloud is gone nowadays, I mean, you have with Microsoft Azure AD, and Azure is their way of controlling systems outside in the network, and of course Office 365. And they talked a lot about that. Intune is another piece that's used for security to keep things connected securely through the Microsoft piece. So you can license your software as well as be able to control the device. So it kind of works hand in hand, because they did. I'm going to go off a tangent here with security, but Microsoft and JAMF are working together. They had been for over a year trying to get this piece to work for security purposes with Intune and JAMF. If not anybody's familiar with Intune, Intune's a internal service that I'm not getting too technical with it. It's a service that allows you to manage devices within your network with Microsoft's products.
Just so much going on, and it's fascinating right now that you say that the cloud is sort of persona non grata in the enterprise, and yet there's so many things that are pushing us to the cloud. Microsoft with 365, right. Google, of course, with Google Docs, Slack as a collaborative tool, Facebook wants in on that deal. What am I missing? Dropbox has enterprise solutions now. I mean, there's so much, and of course, then we get to the creatives where Adobe is pushing a lot of their stuff into the cloud, and Apple wants to sync your photos through iCloud so that you have them on all your devices. I mean, after a while, it's just like, wow, this has got to be a security person's nightmare.
Yeah, it is, and I think a lot of enterprise. That's the reason why they go with something like a Microsoft solution in the large companies, because like I said, Intune keeps things controlled. It works on your iOS device. They can control how the information is on the device using the Outlook app instead of native app mail anymore. So that's what they're looking at. The same thing with Office 365. It's in the cloud now. A lot of companies feel comfortable with that because it's in a controlled environment that Microsoft controls for the enterprise. Things like OneDrive. There's specifically OneDrive for Business. We talked about that before. Having that out there now, it keeps things a lot more secure because it's controlled within the Office 365 environment. So the enterprise feel more comfortable with that. So you look at a company like JAMF, who is one of the biggest players. I might not realize how big JAMF really is until I went to this conference and realized that they're just a big player in this Apple world, and with all the Macs that are out there now in the enterprise, it's just amazing where it is with security. But again, because it's not a big company like a Microsoft or a Cisco, a lot of enterprise gets concerned about it, and trying to sell them on it is always a challenge. But I think a lot of them are going with it, but there are still quite a few bigger companies out there who, for any reason, InfoSec, as they call it, the term now, the security is very high, and they worry that we got to put this on premise instead of cloud for now.
I haven't told the story for a while, so I'll tell it because it's a few years old now. But we had someone come into our office, want to do a presentation, needed to hook up to the internet, so we plugged in an Ethernet jack because it didn't have Wi-Fi, and we could not get it to work for anything. Mm-hmm. And she finally ended up having to call back to her home office, and they said, "Oh, well, there's nothing there." And it's like, what do you mean there's nothing there? Well, they took out all the guts behind the Ethernet jack, so you're just plugging into an empty jack.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's like, okay, now we were debating as to whether this was cost saving or security. But where I'm going with this is that this still happens at times when people come to our office to do presentations or whatever, and they are hamstrung by all the security that's put on there. And I just wonder, in the conference, is there a discussion of just security as just pure security, or security and make sure that the machines and the capabilities are still there and usable for the people that need to get stuff done?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was one session I sat in that involved Liberty Mutual Insurance and Cisco, and the way they went about implementing a lot of Cisco's new products. So obviously, they have things like AnyConnect and the network address control, and many companies use that now because really what they want to do is, if there is Ethernet jacks that are live, but I say it's very surprising that was just a dead dummy jack. That's kind of strange. They can't just plug in and willy-nilly be able to get onto the network or the internet for that matter, because each machine has to have a specific certificate that says, okay, yes, you're allowed to be on the network because it has that little certificate. And if it isn't, then it's not going to allow them on. So there's a lot of new. There's some new products out there that Cisco was working on. They talked about it a little bit, and Liberty Mutual actually went through some of their methods. So it was kind of cool just to see what other companies do and to see how they keep things secure. But yeah, it seems like a lot of companies are doing that now, and rightfully so. You don't want people to just walk into your office and hook up to the network and then potentially could hack and get into your servers. You get into accessing sensitive information. That's this day and age. Like you said, you mentioned the Equifax thing. Yeah, you guys, everybody, you got to be aware of what's around you and relates to security. So.
And it cuts both ways. I mean, you don't want your network infected with anything they might have or any malicious activities, but at the same time, those companies don't want them just going out and willy-nilly plugging into anything, and who knows what kind of malware might be injected onto their machines. So it's a double-edged sword. And boy, it's tough when somebody stands up in front of a board of directors and they can't get their computer to work.
Absolutely, and I kind of want to. That's a good segue for me to talk about is where the Macs are in the enterprise. I was blown away about how these large corporations have decided to go with a user choice program, being able to choose what type of device they get, and it tells you that these corporations are very satisfied with how secure Macs can be. I mean, they have their issues. But if you look at last year, IBM made that announcement that they're going to allow their users to choose what laptop they want. So 150,000 Macs are now deployed in IBM's infrastructure. Who would ever have thought IBM, of all the companies, would have all these Macs in place? And it was an interesting stat relates to that too, even with support too, is the fact that only 4% of people called in for support on Macs, because they're pretty, for the most people who use Macs are very self-sufficient in being able to help themselves. Where you go onto the Windows side of things, 27% were the calls. So quite a difference. Then you look at cost. I mean, yeah, Macs cost a lot of money in up front, but the return on investment is huge because, after 3 years, and that's pretty much the standard in the industry for enterprises, is they recycle machines after 3 years. The value of a Mac, as we all know, is just awesome. I mean, to turn around and sell them, I mean, they'll make their money back right there, just paying some of it. And they had three other companies this year that made announcements of who are doing it now. SAP, one of them, 12,000 Macs in their environment. Capital One, 12,000 in their environment. And then the big one was Walmart. I couldn't believe they made that big announcement. 100,000 Macs are going to be potentially released for them as well. So spin that back on security. I mean, that really tells you that they're comfortable not only with the security of the Macs in themselves, but having JAMF involved with it as well, keeping them maintained is huge. I mean, because there's systems out there that manage Windows, but to have something with Mac, I mean, that's really been the biggest game changer. And JAMF's been around, 7-8 years, I think it is now.
At least, yeah.
Yeah, and you look back and looking at customers, there was customer numbers too. There's 6,000 customers in 2015. They moved up to 13,000 customers in 2017. I think some of your ads have helped them a little bit, but yeah. So yeah, that was just some of these numbers just blew me away when I was sitting through some of these keynotes the first 2 days. So.
And, I can't help it. There's a certain amount of glee that goes with seeing those kind of announcements at IBM and Walmart. It's like, we told you this, and we told you this a lot of years ago. So if you'd paid attention to us, how much money could you have saved? And it just, I mean, it is. You hear those stories from school district administrators who say, well, we were able to cut our IT staff, or at least our IT budget, significantly because there's just not a lot of support. I mean, yeah. Sure, kids beat up on machines, but as far as the technical part, and I know teachers that to this day they're running on Windows systems of one kind or another, and they struggle with them, and they don't use them the way that you would like to see technology being used in classrooms, because they're either not functional, or they're not accessible, or they don't get the training on them. So I'll get off my soapbox, I promise. But
no. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's really coming of age. It really is. As I mentioned earlier, the school district using 16,000 iPads. I mean, they give incoming freshmen in this local school district here in Chicago they all get iPads for them freshman year, and they keep them all throughout their career in high school till their senior year, and they get to keep them. Well, because at that point they're 4 years old, and who knows what value they have at that point. But
Right.
but granted, they have control of how things are installed at that time. So I mean, it's a much more secure, robust system. I mean, it really is.
I realize what you just said, but I'm curious. Do you have any sense of, was there a significant percentage of educators there at the conference, or was it just another sliver of specialties?
You know what? I just talking to people, I kind of felt the education market's slightly a little higher when it comes to the people there. I think education's a little higher with JAMF than it was with the enterprise, but I mean, there's their share of enterprise too. So I mean, I think but I would tend to lean towards there was a lot more educators there because they mix the topics, because there were some topics I wouldn't really be interested in since I don't work in the education market. But they did have a good share of in the enterprise too.
Well, I think a lot of us tend to forget that education is big business.
Really is.
I mean, in every single community out there, and from kindergartens right on up through universities, there's so many.
Yeah, I talked to all of them. I mean, I talked to somebody from Iowa State University, and they told me they have different locations. It's a kind of a mix. It was interesting just to kind of find out what they do. And if I remember numbers correctly, he said there are about 300 machines they manage, but there's a lot of unmanaged machines because they let them on the network. It's like, okay, that's interesting, because then some of the universities are a little more loose with that than, of course, the enterprise is. So, but it was all over the map, different types, even the K through 12, just high school, all kinds of different places. I mean, I even remember that the hospitals was huge. That's the other part of the equation too. I forgot is the medical industry and hospitals and doctors and that piece of it's big too. In fact, they showed a clip for, I think it was San Diego. Out in San Diego, there was a hospital that was, I don't know if it was University of San Diego, I think, if I remember correctly. They wanted to set up the rooms in the hospital that they had Apple TVs and they had iPads, and everything was controlled by iPad, including the HomeKit, being able to open and close the blinds, and wanting to make the patient comfortable while they're there and take their mind off of why they really are there, because they're trying to get better, whether they're ill or as well. So it was a really neat thing, and I thought, yeah, that's a pretty expensive hospital too, is to have a lot of that technology. But I think a lot of hospitals are seeing that that's got some great value, because it makes people feel better, because they're going into the room. It's a beautiful room. We got a nice big 60-inch TV. They can, it's just like the comforts at home. But but they want them to get their minds off of what really is the problem, their illness. Sure.
I know one of the other announcements, I believe, was last week that Delta. I think it was Delta, yeah, was abandoning the or it wasn't real clear, the releases I saw, whether they were completely abandoning the Surfaces, but they are definitely headed toward iPads for the flight bags, which, again, I mean, I love that fact, because it just feels to me like they would be much more secure and much more proven.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was never a huge fan of the Surface devices. I mean, I know they're getting better, but again, us being in the Apple world, we kind of like to lean towards iPads. But you're starting to see it even more and more that the iPads are becoming just available with other businesses too. Yeah, Delta, I think, and United, I think I'd heard potentially is switching as well. So, I mean, it's easier to develop. I mean, you got the good app development available. If you have to do specific types of apps for their reasoning, I mean, as well as there's apps already out there that they can utilize. So, it just continues to evolve, and it's just what excited me about the fact that Apple in itself is here to stay. I mean, especially the Macs, because you were always concerned. The Macs it's a niche. People are still using. I mean, because you remember, think back, many years ago, there was this kind of a hobby, and a lot of people didn't have Macs, and then now, I mean, you look at the way the enterprise has really embraced it. It's great. I mean, it's a great, exciting time to develop Apple.
But it's also great to see Apple has such a hold in the mobile computing, because there's no question that's where so many things are going. I think a lot of the pundits want to believe that we're there, or we're going to get there in a year or two, and I'm not convinced it's going to happen quite that fast, without a whole lot of advances in hardware and software. So, but we're definitely on the way. There's no question about it.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I was hoping I think we're gonna have to say the iPhone 10 at least once because the pre-orders just happened while we're recording this yesterday, so I'm sure a lot of people have already ordered them. But I mean, it's the same thing with the iPhone 10. I mean, just the Face ID, the new technologies, yeah, I agree. It's just an exciting time to be part of Apple and the ecosystem that's going on right now. It's just I get more excited about it.
Yeah. So let's mix the enterprise up a little bit with what you and I like to do, at least personally. And I'd like to find out if there were discussions about any particular productivity apps, or what did you get a sense from any of the people you talked to that there are specific apps that they really do love, and that are I'm not going to say they're a standard, but they're quickly becoming a standard, or is it just sort of all over the place?
It's all over the place. I didn't have quite a spin in really people talking too much about apps. I mean, I think the focus was JAMF, and the focus was on what JAMF does, and the ability to being able to control what goes onto these devices. I mean, your normal stuff like on the Mac, you have Office and you have Adobe, and being able to install that stuff just for productivity. To just the browsers, because people want to use Firefox, they want to use Chrome, and the great thing about what the JAMF tool is being able to control how that installs and what it installs, narrowing it right down to you can't do anything with it. You can't install apps, you can't get to the App Store. I mean, there's that in itself, I think, is where the productivity goes. So I really didn't see anything specific that I would use other than what I was talked about in the show at the conference, but. Yeah, I didn't see really much in this way of that was too much discussion about apps. So I was really focused on the JAMF product itself.
Okay. Well, then, how about you? What are some of your favorite productivity apps? What helps you get done what you want to do both at the office and at home and your other projects?
I really, and honestly, I'm really loving the Notes app that Apple provides. Other product I just started exploring is I don't know if you're familiar with a product called Day One.
Yes.
Day One journaling app, and in fact, I just got a premium account, and I'm actually starting to like it. I didn't use it too much, haven't really used it too much as of yet, but it's kind of neat that the fact that you go around throughout your day, and then it reminds you at the end of the day, you were at 6 locations this today. You might want to journal this, and it gives you it forces you upon doing a journaling. And I think there's a free version where you can just do one journal, but I think the premium account just gives you syncing. So you get a premium account, be able to do that. That's one of them. And then all the Readdle apps that with PDF Expert, I use that a lot. I find that to be a very good resource, and it's one of my favorite PDF viewers. And productivity, I don't know if you necessarily call podcasting productivity, but
Sure.
you and I both love Downcast. I mean, I've tried so many others, and I'm just in love with Downcast. I think it lets me be able to keep all the podcasts I want to view to see what I decide I want to listen to, versus some of these others where, especially the Apple Podcast app, where it forces you to play it and it downloads them. And I love that app in itself. Those have been kind of my top 3 that I've been looking at lately. It relates to productivity as far as apps go, but just so many others. I mean, I'm sure you have your favorites too.
Oh, yeah. Do you use any of the Pages, Numbers, Keynote on the iOS devices? I do, and in fact, I do it for my podcast with Melissa Davis, and I do it when we collaborate on our show notes before we do our show, and I've been using that a lot lately, just because her and I started using it. It's like, oh, this is great, because it's so easy just to go from your Mac to your iOS device and vice versa, and be able to just go in and start editing the document, and I've started to use that a little bit more. Numbers, I don't do too much as far as spreadsheets go, but the thing is, you have the Office products too. So I would utilize Excel on the iOS device and Word. Those are probably my top 2 when I need to edit something on the fly with stuff. And in business, I can do that too, because I'm linked to our network, and being able to save things onto OneDrive for business, and being able to do that in my business world. But even in my personal, I do that too. I find it to be very, very good to keep productive. I'm finding more and more that I gravitate toward apps that, like you said with Apple's Notes, that sync across all the devices. So it doesn't matter whether my Mac is in front of me, or my iPad is in my lap, or my phone is in my hand. That if I have something I want to do access or add to it, that I can just pull it up and there it is, and you don't have to think too much about it.
Yeah. And scanning too. That's the other piece. I mean, I'm just looking at. I think the guys from Readdle make amazing products. They really do. And Scanner Pro is another one I use all the time, because you're always going to have a hard copy document that you need to scan real quick and get in there. Granted, Apple's made some big strides with Notes now that you can scan right into Notes, which I really love, and being productive with that. Another thing I can think of too with what Apple's actually added too is the built-in QR code reader. That keeping me productive that way, because now I can just go up and bring my camera up, put it up to a QR code, and it says, "Oh, I see you have a QR code." You tap it, and then it comes right up. And there's no need for third party when it comes to reading QR codes anymore. So I find that to help me keep me a little productive, because it's definitely a easy way to be able to get the information you want from the QR codes.
I think it was Sierra. I don't think I'm making that up. I'm pretty sure it was Sierra when we got to Sierra, and you had the option to store your documents folder in the cloud.
Right.
And that was one of the things that was kind of a gotcha. You sure you want to do this, because that's going to, first of all, it's going to chew up a lot of iCloud space, but do you really want all that stuff stored in the cloud? Personally. And I have to tell you, the more I use Notes and these services and these apps that sync back and forth, I'm starting to think, I think I'm fast moving to a point where I would be very comfortable with having that, so that all my Macs were in sync and all my iDevices are in sync as far as having access to those projects and materials. Admittedly, there's some things that are not going to be able to be used on which device you're talking about, but the idea that if you have this one central pile of all of your files, working and or archives, starting to really appeal to me.
I agree, and the other thing I'm really excited about is with iOS 11, with the advent of iOS 11, is the Files app in itself on iOS, being able to finally be able to manage your files using the Files app, and being able to move them around and being able to get to them very easily, because it was always a nuisance. You wanted to open up between other different apps. You want to be able to do that. So I think, I agree with 100%. It's been a bit of a challenge for me to get used to the having all my files on iCloud on my Mac, because I was so used to. Of course, our favorite place to store everything is the downloads folder, and because we keep it local. I imagine some people's downloads folder, how many gigs and gigs of stuff it's in there that no one ever really realizes there. But using iCloud Drive has been quite a cool thing, because everything's there now. You just sync across all your devices, and you don't have to worry. Oh gosh, I got to go to the other computer to grab that. And it's always there, which is great.
Okay, so what apps don't you have? And what I mean by that is what haven't you found that you would like to have, or an app or service, or what? And I don't, obviously let's not go too pie in the sky, but realistically, what problem do you run into day in, day out, and you think, boy, if it would just do this?
Boy, you got me off guard here. I think the browser has always been a challenge for me. I mean, Safari does most of this stuff, and I've used some other third-party browsers, and I'm trying to, it's hard for me to say really relate to what the browser is doing. It's continuing to evolve. I mean, I think Safari is a more than adequate browser. Chrome and Firefox are available as well, I don't know. It's hard for me to say just really what it doesn't do for me anymore. I mean, the browser itself, it plays videos. You're able to get to things on the internet and surfing. I'd like to see the browser continue to evolve, I guess really is really what I want. Is really the way I would answer that is in hoping that it does a better job of continuing to do a better job with surfing the internet.
So do you want things to happen inside the browser, or are you talking about more compatibility?
More compatibility, because sometimes you go to some of these websites, they don't work, and of course you blame the website's content a lot of times, but I think that I think the browsers always have room for improvement. One of the obviously some of the good things that Safari does is I love their reading view, the reading list view, where you can change it and automatically convert. So they've really done a good job with that. But there's always room for improvement relates to that.
Do you use RSS?
Oh, absolutely, all the time. Yeah, I think, and that's the other thing. That's a good thinking of that is getting access to RSS, because a lot of apps on iOS don't read RSS very well. When you go into a browser on your Mac like Firefox and such, you can browse to those lists. Whether it be your feed or any other feed or any other news information, you always have to have the news app or some other reader, RSS reader. RSS, I guess, is it's an old technology, that's for sure. But it's still here to stay. And yeah, I agree with you that's probably one of the things I would wish that the browsers had that built into, so you can actually read it better.
Well, I asked just because RSS for a while, it was so hot and burned so bright, and then Google pulled their what basically people were using as the back end, and everybody proclaimed that was the death of RSS. And it's like, no, the technology is still good. It's still a great way to get through a lot of different feeds, a lot of different websites, curate the information quickly. And there's some that are beautiful and there's some that are not so beautiful. But at the end of the day, I've found a couple that I prefer the lack of beauty being and have them be a little more serviceable, so that I can cut through things quick and get to what I want or find what I need. So I think anybody that's overlooking RSS or believes that it's dead, and I'm not just being a curmudgeon here, folks. I really think that it's out there, and learn to use it, find the right tool for you, and you can access a lot more stuff a lot quicker and not have to rely on Facebook or Twitter to tell you what you need to know.
No, and I agree, because even as I publish podcasts I've been doing podcasts for a while here, is using the RSS feeds built into some of the tools that are provided to us. It makes it so much easier, and it looks beautiful too. I'm posting information about a specific podcast for me in Twitter. It's got the video player right into it, and that's using an RSS feed as part of its syncing. And because you see some of these links, and especially when you link to something and you want to share it, especially on Twitter or Facebook, it looks horrible because it just shows like a bunch of words and lines, and then people are probably scared to click it because they don't see actually what it is. I mean, LinkedIn too. I mean, I'm very active posting across all of social media because of that, and yeah, people should really start to realize that RSS feeds should be designed in such a way so you're seeing the information a lot cleaner than it used to be. But yeah, I agree.
So I don't know where we go from here. I mean, there's so many great productivity apps, and I was anxious to see what you would pick out the ones. I was also interested to see if that was a topic of the conference, and apparently it wasn't, because it's a little bit more focused on the admin side of security.
Security, and I said a lot of programming, a lot of vendors were out there. There was some. I didn't sit in the coding 101. I really wanted to, but Adam Akes and I were together, and I wanted to sit in with the security one with the gentleman from the Department of Navy. And now I remember he was in San Diego and got to help support all the folks out in San Diego, and then he had to move to Omaha, Nebraska as a different. So he was kind of joking about that stuff, but it's just interesting. And people were asking questions about him questions about stuff, and he's like, I can't comment about that. I can't talk. Because it's because it was just it was such a different way of thinking. But I'm just kind of looking at the list here, so some of the stuff. I mean, it was security, it was development, it was coding, writing scripts. There was just a lot of heavy discussion, because JAMF is very customizable, and then that's what that's what the JAMF Nation does. Is people get together and they say, hey, I can code this and be able to do this and make it a little different than what the core product does. So that's what's great about the JAMF and being able to customize for the needs. But yeah, I did not see a lot of app discussion specifically. It was more of that stuff.
Maybe next year.
Yeah, well, this is my first year, and I'm still pretty new with JAMF in itself and learning about it. I had not realized how like I said at the beginning, is how big they are and how powerful the product is. So
First of all, thank you for sharing all that information. And I want to make sure we give folks an idea of where else they can find you, because you've become a podcasting machine. It's kind of impressive what has happened since I met you.
Since you and I met, it's been 3 years now, and I can't believe it's going back to MacStock. The first big podcast you find me at is with the one I do with Melissa Davis, and her and I hit it off and met, and we're 15 episodes strong. And actually, the last episode I just did was with Bear Folk, because Melissa was not available. So people take a look and listen to that. So yeah, it's In Touch with iOS. InTouchWithIOS.com is our podcast, and we're having a lot of fun doing that. Delving into a few other things, not outside of technology, but that's the one I really have people check out. And everybody can find me on Twitter at DaveG65. I'm very active on the Twitter feeds and try to do that. And I follow your group and try to get involved with a lot of stuff because you guys get a lot of questions in your Facebook group, and it's been getting a lot of traction. So yeah, as I continue to evolve myself into technology and get myself out there, I'm really loving it, and you've been great to me as well. I really appreciate you having me on your show and our friendship and continued support with my endeavors and continuing on to do this. It's more so for me. This is a hobby, and like you and I both work in the insurance industry, so we just do that by day and have this fun at night. So
exactly. David, thanks so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate you going and sharing and coming back and sharing a little, because this is one of those conferences that is so specific that not a lot of people know about it. And I think it's important for people to find out about, not only the conferences, but the resources, and also about how seriously a lot of people are taking this stuff. We all tend to get wrapped up in our day-to-day lives and forget that there's a lot of moving parts in the background, and especially with large corporations and large entities. And the tools are there for the Mac, and get out there and use them.
Yes, use them, because I'm telling them they're out there, and then it's just going to continue to get better.
We will see you again soon.
Yes, thanks again.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. Definitely go check out JAMF at jamf.com. See what David and I have been talking about. If you are interested in managing iOS devices and Macs, or if you just want to do it for your family, you can do several devices for free and just get the feel for what we're talking about. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our MacVoices Facebook group and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices magazine, free on Flipboard. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us at patreon.com/MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.